What if you did everything right? You got the degree, you built a career, but you still found yourself just barely treading water. Well, that's the big question at the heart of Alyssa Court's powerful book, Squeezed. Today, we're going to break down why so many American middle class families are finding it pretty much impossible to get by, let alone get ahead. And this quote, it just gets right to the heart of the crisis, doesn't it? This isn't about people mismanaging their money. It's about being in a system where even with good wages, the absolute basics are becoming unaffordable. And this woman, Michelle Belmont, a high-tech librarian, she found herself caught in this exact trap. So Michelle's story, it's really the perfect way to understand this thing that's been called the middle class squeeze. It's that feeling, like you're on a hamster wheel running faster and faster just to find yourself in the exact same spot, or maybe even slipping backwards. Think about it. The normal stuff in life, things that are supposed to be happy or at least manageable, they've become like financial time bombs. For Michelle, it kicked off with student loans. Then her son Eamon was born, and bam, a shocking $20,000 hospital bill. When he got sick later on, the bills just kept piling up, and it threw her into a six-figure debt spiral. And listen, this isn't just a case of one family having some bad luck. The entire economic landscape has shifted under our feet. The actual price tag for just maintaining a middle-class life has jumped by almost 30% in just 2 decades. So what in the world is driving that? Let's take a look at the numbers. So here's the deal. The very things that were supposed to be pillars of middle-class security, they've basically crumbled. The cost of a 4-year public university degree, which used to be the ticket to moving up in the world, has doubled. And healthcare costs, yeah, they've doubled too. We're not talking about luxuries here. These are the absolute essentials, and now they're priced like there's some kind of fancy optional extra. And you can see the result of all this right here. If you were born in the 1940s, it was almost a guarantee you'd end up doing better than your parents did. But if you were born in the 80s, it's now just a 50-50 coin toss. That promise of upward mobility, that core part of the American dream, it's stalling out. And this economic squeeze is a massive reason why. Okay, so where does all this pressure really start to build? Well, for a lot of people, it hits hardest the moment they decide to have a family. The book gives this a specific name, and it's a powerful one: the parent penalty. Let's talk about Daniela. Her story is just a textbook case of this. She was a rising star at her law firm, had a great relationship with her boss. Everything was going great. But the moment she announced she was pregnant, it's like a switch flipped. He literally stopped speaking to her for a week. Suddenly, she was being sidelined, criticized, basically made to feel like having a kid was some kind of betrayal to her job. And you might be thinking, well, that was just a terrible boss. But it's not that simple. This is a systematic problem, and it's called the parental penalty. It's the very real, measurable fact that working parents, especially mothers, are often seen as less committed. And that has real financial consequences. Studies have actually shown that mothers are less likely to get hired and are offered lower salaries than women without kids, who have the exact same qualifications. And when you look at how the U.S. stacks up against other countries, it becomes painfully clear why this penalty is so harsh here. The main federal policy, the FMLA, gives you 12 weeks of, get this, unpaid leave. And that's only if you're lucky enough to qualify, which about half the workforce doesn't. Now look at Denmark. Parents get a combined 52 weeks of paid leave. The difference in the level of support is just staggering. But it's not just parents who are feeling this pinch. It's also creating this really strange, kind of heartbreaking group of people the book calls the educated poor. These are people who did everything they were supposed to do. They got the degrees, they pursued their passion, and they still can't make a living wage. Listen to this quote from Brianne Bolin. It gets you right in the gut. It perfectly captures that feeling of confusion and self-blame. She followed the exact path she was told would lead to a stable, middle-class life, only to get there and find out that the path had just vanished. Okay, let's just lay out the reality of her situation. She has a master's degree, she teaches multiple college courses, and her annual income is under $24,000. A college professor on food stamps and Medicaid, trying to support herself and her son. She's part of what court calls the middle precariat, people with a lot of education but zero job security or financial stability. So, how does something like this even happen? Well, the book brings up this fascinating idea called cruel optimism. It's kind of like this. You know that whole cultural mantra of do what you love? Well, this is the dark side of that idea. It actually encourages people to accept terrible pay and bad working conditions in fields they're passionate about, turning their own dreams into a tool for their own exploitation. All right, so this leads us to another piece of the puzzle, one that's usually hidden from view, and it's called the global care chain. Because for many American professionals to make their own demanding careers work, they rely on a hidden workforce that comes with its own huge, often heartbreaking costs. Her name is Blanca, and to give her son Guido a shot at a better life, she did something pretty much unimaginable for most parents. She left him in Paraguay with his grandmother and came to the US to work as a nanny. For a full decade, she raised other people's children while her own son grew up thousands of miles away.
So here's a simple breakdown of how this whole thing functions. It's this chain of care that stretches clear across the globe, and each link in that chain is a woman's labor. You have a professional mother in the US who hires an immigrant woman like Blanca. Blanca then sends money home so that her own mother or another relative can take care of her child, Guido. So, after hearing all these stories of debt, of career penalties, of impossible choices, it is so easy to fall into that trap of blaming yourself, just like Michelle and Brianne did. But this is where the book makes its most crucial, most important argument.
I want you to really hear this. The incredible pressure, the anxiety, that feeling deep down that you've somehow failed. It is not your fault. It is a feature of huge systemic shifts in our economy. Feeling squeezed is the only rational response to an irrational system. And this isn't just a nice thought, okay? The numbers, the hard data, they absolutely scream it. Let's just walk through this. Back in 1978, the top 1% of earners took home about 9% of the national income. Now, jump forward to 2015, and the U.S. had the largest wealth gap of 200 countries that were surveyed. And today, the racial disparities show an even deeper chasm. This widening gap is the engine that's creating the pressure cooker that is the middle-class squeeze. And all of this really boils down to one huge fundamental question. The whole idea of the American dream, right? It was built on this simple promise. If you work hard and you play by the rules, you can build a better life for yourself and your kids. But if the cost of that life is skyrocketing, while the chance to actually get ahead is disappearing, what's left of that promise? That's the question at the heart of Squeezed, and it's one we all really have to think about.